Sure.
Our peoples will be joining in YouTube and also Zoom.
Okay.
Okay. Whatever may be the strength, we can able to start by 11 o'clock.
That's okay, sir. That's okay.
Why? Because we will be having our recordings also.
Sure, sir. Okay. Sorry? I couldn't
You are
hear.
audible, madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
I will just share screen and key. You have to enable me to share the screen, sorry. Can you see it, sir? Hello?
Yes, madam, it is visible.
Okay, sir. Great.
Okay, very good morning. Very good morning to the participants. Very good morning to the leaders who have been joined for our NVT Industrial Empowerment session number 78. Thanks for the participants who have been joined in the Zoom and also in our YouTube channel. Thanks for making this event. NVT, Invent, Innovate, and Inspire. With this mission, NVT has been traveling for last 4 years in the domains of safety, quality, and psychology. NVT is having a verticals of training wing, audit wing, technological wing, and health and wellness wing. From our training wing, we have been organizing this session for the 17th week for the empowerment of the industrial persons. This week is one of the most important week. We're going to talk about ESG, environment, social governance, part 2. Last month, we have been had our ESG session on part 1. This session, we have been going to talk about how we have been going to implement this ESG in your industries. For this session, I've been very happy and pleased to introduce our renowned speaker, Ms. Deshika Prabhakar, a sustainability consultant. She is a passionate techno-commercial professional with having a 7+ years experience in sustainable domain and drive towards creating real-time impact by effectively supporting all class of organization in their ESG journey. And she's been having a rich experience in ESG reporting as a ESG sustainable consultant in various fields. Some renowned fields are IIT Madras Research Park. She's been a project manager there. She's been heading a biocombustible polymers with nano additives for Tata Steels. With this renowned experience, we have been welcoming you, madam, for this wonderful session. And thanks for sharing your experience on ESG reporting. And we have been expecting how to frame this ESG reporting for the industries. The screen is yours. Thank you for accepting the invite and thanks for joining. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. So this 3-letter phenomenon that is turning heads at a great pace, turning budgets, turning the whole system, and more importantly, the way we fight climate change, ESG. So is this a compliance or a complication? Is it a superpower or simply paperwork? How are organizations building their business resilience and how can we hop on board? So this is going to be the crux of the session today. Vanakkam, Iyarkai Thunai. I'm Deshika Prabhakar. As sir gave a lovely introduction, thank you so much, sir. So it has been great to have this opportunity from my alumni and who is actually a big source of inspiration for me, Dr. Satya sir. So thank you so much, and I'm very happy and actually amazed that Sunday, so much enthusiastic hearts are here, compromising their sleep and the aroma of biryani. So really appreciate this joining with us today, so I'm just going to be sharing the whole journey of how you can implement your ESG in your organization with the growing expertise I have been having over the few years in the field. So this has been a very reviving journey for the whole ESG system as well, because there has been a lot of growth and need for awareness, need for impact to be created by organization on various sustainability initiatives. So today what we will be seeing is a 360 view on how, what and what not to do in the ESG space. So Dr. Satya would have briefed you on the prospects and potential of the ESG and its industry as a whole in the part 1. And today it will be more about the walking the talk sort of a phenomenon. How do we do this on ground? So we will be dealing with four verticals. So we will be dealing with discussing 4 verticals here. First of all is to understand what we call as frameworks in this space. So how are companies doing it? What are the outlines that they are following to disclose their ESG aspects? And what is the benefit that they're getting out of this? Then the third section will deal with how are we going to implement this structure? What are the steps for the implementation? Finally, we'll be talking about how to communicate this to the stakeholders and what are the assurance or validation that is required in this space. So let's kick off with a glimpse of how the journey has been for the whole ESG industry. So ESG, though it has been becoming the buzzword in recent times, it actually goes back to even 2000s, where first it was known to be integrated into business reporting. So even well before the Paris Agreement, so you all must be well aware of the Paris Agreement of 2015, where all nations had associated to set goals that we will keep the temperature less than 2 degrees Celsius. So this dates back to even before that, and as standards have been revising and methodologies has been framed, mainly predominantly in Europe and US side, the transition and the footprint has now crossed and reached India as well, wherein we see now the something called the BRSR as a compliance being mandated for top 1,000 listed companies as of 2022. So the journey for India has sort of just begun, and we are seeing a lot of organizations raising to the occasion to forefront their ESG initiatives. So before that, I also want to mention a subtle difference there is between ESG as a phenomenon and sustainability. So both of it are somewhat synonymous. However, ESG is more of what we see as a comparable phenomenon. And sustainability is more of an adaptive phenomenon comprising of profit, planet, and people mantra, where businesses are how businesses are adapting, making themselves viable for to hold the next generation. So there's a subtle difference between the two, and I just wanted to clarify that before we step in. So, yeah. Okay. So in India, how does this sort of a non-financial reporting, they call it. So we have heard of, we always see annual reports of companies being generated, that's the financial reports. So this is ideally termed as, or the jargon, what we call is a non-financial reporting. That's equivalent to ESG. So in India, what is driving this is what I see is two main reasons. One is the push from the investor side, and two is the push from the regulatory side. So investors, why are they pushing and why are they causing that push is because we see that already there has been mandates where foreign investors are required to have such green oriented portfolios, what we call as those companies which have a good ESG appearance, ESG implementation, and ESG scoring, as they call it. So this pressure is on investors, and on the other hand, they also see that the returns on ESG sort of portfolio companies is actually very consistent and sustainable on a long-term basis. So there is a lot of peaked interests among investors to pursue these ESG glorified companies, and thus they have more weightage for these sort of companies. On the other side, regulations, as I said, by the Securities Exchange Board of India, that it has been mandated that the 1,000 listed companies must disclose their ESG reporting as of 2020, from 2022 itself. So this has been in the process, which is also pushing companies forward to take part in the ESG implementation. So as a first step, we have to kind of understand how to do this. So what are the framework elements, like what are the outlines that we have to follow to participate in the ESG reporting aspects. So before that, I wanted to explain what are the elements that are critical for each pillar of environment, social, and governance. So in environment part, of course, you all must be very familiar with the E part is the most widely researched and most widely adopted, implemented sort of a section, because we have a more wide pressure as well as an understanding, I would say, on the environment side with climate change policies and how to conserve natural resources, carbon taxes coming up, and the carbon credit system coming up to offset carbon emissions, how to preserve biodiversity, efficiently contribute to land use. All of these opportunities in renewable energy, waste management, upcycling, recycling sort of initiatives come under the environment pillar. As such, it will be discussed completely on the environment pillar. When you look at the social pillar and the governance pillar, these are a little less, how do I put, familiarized concepts, even all over the globe, I would say, especially in India, very, very less familiarized concepts, very much in the nascent stage. And social pillars take into account labor management, the safety aspects of the employees, which I'm sure Dr. Satya would have really drilled down the training part. So all these aspects with respect to labor, the quality of employee wellness that's been going into place, healthcare options given, what is the stakeholder communication and interests, how do we go into responsible investments, all of this come under a social pillar, mainly focused with the community and community contributions. So the governance pillar, if you take into consideration, it's mostly into a legal and sort of restricted to the board of directors and how well they are running the organization from a legal and a compliance standpoint. It's completely into a regulatory and sort of a financial and accounting tax related prospects and verticals that are taken into consideration into the governance prospects. So here what I've tried to do is bucket the whole of the disclosure formats or the frameworks that we have into 4 different categories. So let me first define what is a framework. Actually, there are a lot of frameworks, standards and principles. So there is a framework, there is a standard, and there's also principles to help us do the reporting. And what we call a framework and a standard, the difference is that framework is more of a broader term, which does not exactly give you what methodology or how to do the calculations, how to do the reporting, but a standard is more structured and it gives you the exact, dictates the exact methodology, and it's well defined. So the standards are what we adopt or what we follow to actually carry out the methodology and the implementation part. So this division or bifurcation, what we have here is primarily the mandatory disclosures and the voluntary disclosures. So what a mandatory is, like by law that we just have to follow it blindly, that whatever the methodology is given, we have to go with it and report it. So in India, we have that mandatory reporting structure, what is called the BRSR, the business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So this is by law mandated for all companies, all listed companies at present, to be followed for the ESG disclosures. So there's other thing which was a more primarily released sort of a voluntary disclosures framework. So what a voluntary disclosures is, excuse me, what a voluntary disclosures is, these are standards which are made by private organizations, by NGOs, and those sort of organizations which come up with their own frameworks which can be adopted universally, and they are also recognized. So it is a more voluntary adoption from your side, that you are choosing to voluntarily take part in this, and it's not mandated or as given by any regulation. So in this voluntary disclosure itself, there are like n number of frameworks. It can actually be pretty confusing for people who are first entering into this space or trying to understand this space. As an organization or as an ESG team, as part of the organization, when you're trying to understand, there are like so many frameworks which can be very, very overwhelming for someone to understand. So what we can try to break it down as is the more universal voluntary disclosures, which is called GRI, CDP, and 17 goals, which you must be definitely aware of. We will discuss this in the upcoming sections. And investor oriented, this is a key disclosure. Investor oriented is what is the framework which is more directed to investors. So mainly, as I told you, the push comes from the investor side to do the ESG reporting. So the investor should understand what is your goal, what is the process that you're following to calculate your ESG, and what is the methodology you're following for reporting it. So this should be in a language which is easy for the investor. So these frameworks given here is more focused to pleasing the investors and investor community. And there are also something called validatory agencies, where something called the FTSE for Good and EcoVedas, BJSI, all of these also we will be discussing further. These are all bodies which kind of give you an accreditation, a certification that you are doing something authentic, like a third-party verification. So all of this also is to please the investor, to give them a verified, validated data. Finally, we can separate it as a sector-specific sort of framework. So sector-specific is industry-oriented. So if you are from a developer organization, so real estate developers, means there's something which is very widely adopted called the GRESB. So this is exclusively for the real estate community, where a lot of methodologies have been defined and scoring is given to have a benchmark among the real estate community. So real estate organizations. So in this also applies for, there are frameworks for tourism industry, there are also social related frameworks, and a lot more. So broadly, I've classified it into mandatory voluntary disclosures and investor oriented disclosures and sector oriented disclosures. So we look into each one of them now. GRI. So GRI is the most universally adopted and very common knowledge among all organizations all over the globe. It goes back to even 1997, friends. It was framed in terms of the voluntary disclosures. So it has about 34 possible topic areas where, as I mentioned, some key elements before. Those kind of topics will be dictated in this 34 possible areas, and they have segmented it into a series where 100 series is a universal reporting where you disclose about your basic company information, your subsidiaries, employee details, all of this, like what is the distribution, all of this comes under basic details of the company comes under 100 series. 200 deals with your economic disclosures, 300 series deals with environment, and 400 with social. So there is 201, 202, 203, all this bifurcation of different topics. Like a questionnaire format, you will have all of the spaces to be filled, and it needs to be backed by the data as well. So this is widely preferred because it applies to all stakeholders. Even an investor can read it, a customer can read it, like the government regulations also sort of fits into it. So it applies to all sort of stakeholders, and thus it's the most preferred reporting language and widely adopted one, which is sector agnostic. So there is also something we should consider before I go to the SASB, which is the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. So this is the next most important framework. What happens is most of the times, or no, not most of the times, like always what we see is that not one single framework is used anywhere. Always there's a combination of frameworks, more than 2, more than 3, even 4 frameworks that company used to report, because every investor or every stakeholder has a different preference of understanding. They look for different indicators. Some may give more weightage to the economic factor, some give more weightage to the environment factor. So it's very biased as an industry, and thus what organizations are trying to do is to put forth 2-3 frameworks together, so that it is a more holistic approach for the stakeholder community. So here what we are seeing is SASB. SASB is also most preferred framework. It is mostly disclosing or providing disclosures on materially sustainable aspects to the investor. So more of a combination of finance, the material risks, and sustainability. So what I mean by material, this word of material and materiality is very important and crucial phenomenon in the ESG reporting as a domain itself. So if you are going into this materiality as a concept, is like the ABC. So what is materiality and all in detail, I will also explain in upcoming sessions. So the structure of SASB, like how we saw for GRI, there's 34 different sections. Here we have 77 more industry specific sections. Industry specific sections, and it is again bifurcated under 11 different categories, which is again documented as standards, as a different basis for applications, and with some recommendations and guidelines is also given. It's very thorough on a financial and material standpoint for the investors. So, and it's a most preferred choice when you want to communicate it to the investors, because it has a lot of financial understanding to economic, environment, and governance aspects. It is more sector specific. Each industry has its own sort of a bifurcation in this particular standard, and often it is used along with GRI. So yeah, so next we will go to task force related task force related task force related task force on climate related financial disclosure. So this is also a more widely adopted sort of a framework, but it is more specific to climate based disclosures. So the investor communities are also very informed about the climate related risks, and they give a lot of preference to the same, and thus this particular disclosure, which came up in 2017, mostly deals with the climate related financial risks that can be possible for the organizations. So it has 11 recommended disclosures on 4 themes: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. So these are the 4 core areas that will be given as recommendations, and you can see how your organization fares with the other peers in your sector specific view. So this also has a main concept of double materiality. So double materiality is nothing but the two-way study, like what impact climate change has on the business, like how it can affect the business, like say sourcing of materials or construction of buildings. There's so much of things that climate change can affect in the way that we run the business, plus the impact that the business has on climate change, like how are we depleting our natural resources, how are we affecting the way that nature works fundamentally. So all of this together as a two-way street is considered in the double materiality concept, which is a crux of the TCFD. Okay. So next important framework is the integrated reporting. So as we see, there's a lot of frameworks coming up, and as I mentioned, it can be too confusing and too overwhelming for an audience. So what happened was this International Integrated Reporting Council came up with like a integrated report format. Like let's put everything together in a concise way, in a more like digested form for someone, for any audience to understand very clearly, mainly the group or diverse aspect of investors. Anyone and everyone can kind of understand and digest the whole progress of the company very easily. So this integrated reporting is also well accommodated in the ESG reporting space, which was developed around 2012 as a base to support baseline and corporate sustainability disclosures. So it has basically 7 guiding principles and 8 key elements as a business model. So the principles, mainly the guiding principles, explain aspects of how the organization is able to create value in a very short time to long time. How is its use and use of resources affecting the capitals and the impact on the environment, social and governance aspects, and it also gives you a holistic picture and how there is an interrelatedness and dependencies of factors between the ability of the organization to create value over a long time. So what is the holistic picture that is given by integrated reporting in simple terms? The principle also states about how your relationships are with the stakeholders, and of course the materiality concept. All of this conveyed in a very crisp and concise format is the main crux of this particular reporting. So we have seen all these sort of reporting frameworks which are widely used. I've given a brief of how the focus is and how the structure is in the main reporting formats adapted in the organizations. But before we go to the framework, the main thing is about, first of all, setting the goals. So setting ESG goals is most important. Without that, we cannot move on to how implementing it itself. So the fundamentals is that we set some goals, like what are we running after? What is there that we want to achieve, and how fast do we want to achieve it? All of these timelines and all of these more milestone based of implementation perspectives comes under, two particular phenomenon called CDP and SBTI. The CDP as such is the Carbon Disclosure Project. So what this does is basically a not-for-profit organization in early 2000 itself, which focuses on the impacts that an organization has on climate, water, and a forest perspective. So these 3 are the focus areas. So what it does, it's kind of a questionnaire that organizations can fill on their website of CDP, and it has a scoring mechanism to know where you are and how you can set goals. So this way you have sort of a baseline that you can benchmark yourself with the competitors and come to a conclusion how fast you should achieve your goals and what are the ways that you can achieve them. But this is more of a guidance and like sort of a framework that helps you to make the goals, but it's more, it's not too ambitious, it's not too agitated or accelerated in the approach. But when you look at the science-based targets, it's very, very specific and scientific backing, which is asked to showcase your implementation strategies to achieve the goals. So what basically science-based target initiative is that it deals with, again, the carbon emissions in itself, which is divided across scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1, 2, and 3 are again the ABCs. For anyone in sustainability space, they would know what scope 1, 2, 3 is. So this is also very, very important when you go into your ESG journey to understand what is scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. I will explain it just in a moment. But before that, like the science-based targets, what happens is that you are trying to exclusively mention that by 2030 that we are going to become net zero. You would have heard a lot of goals or declarations in the media by companies saying by 2030 we are going to achieve net zero, by 2050 we are going to become carbon neutral, all of this. So in fact, Infosys has already achieved what we call carbon neutrality. That is, the amount of emissions and absorptions are equal. How much they are emitting, they are already absorbing, and they maintain it as neutral. They don't have any effect on the environment. So they have already become carbon neutral in 2020 itself, and are setting a very excellent benchmark for all organizations in India. So here the targets are the approaches for setting the targets can be based on sectors. It can be very absolute target, or it can be an economy based targets that defines your budget and how you allocate fighting your emissions and reducing them. So this target setting can be very absolute, or it can be intensity based. Absolute is like setting goals based on the target year. Like as I mentioned, scope 1 emissions, we will reduce 30% by 2030, something like that. And intensity based targets are where you go into more product specific or business specific articles where you're trying to focus more specifically on your claims. For example, scope 3 emissions, we are going to reduce a particular square foot for this much of building space. So you go very much into detail and give them your intensity targets. So in this way, targets need to be set before we proceed into the implementation part. The goals need to be set, which is very, very ideal as a first step. So this image is something that needs to be really etched into minds of organizations to begin their journey. Scope 1, 2, and 3 as given here. So this is an image from what we follow as the GHG protocol. That is the greenhouse gas emission protocol. So this protocol is very, very thorough aspect of estimating your carbon emissions across not only carbon, but also all 6 of the very intense greenhouse gases in terms of a carbon value, so carbon equivalent value. So here scope 1, what do I mean by scope 1 is your direct emissions. So that is right in front of you, within your control, within your manufacturing premises. So that is what we call it as the scope 1, the company facilities, the vehicle emissions within the company space, within the manufacturing space. Whereas the scope 2, which we call as indirect emissions, is mainly your electricity purchase. Excuse me, electricity purchased from outside and sourced from outside. And finally, the scope 3, which is kind of the most least explored or very difficult to assess sort of emissions, is scope 3, because it has around 15 separate segregations, as you can see in the image, which talks about your employee commuting, like how the emissions of your employee coming and going to the office, the business travel of the executives, waste generated, what is the end of life of the product, like if you are making a particular light bulb, or so what is the end of life, how is it crushed, how is it going back to the soil, what is the impact there, till that in detail. All of these 15 aspects comprise of the scope 3 emissions. So this is very, very detailed as such, but however, now the more focus relies on at least scope 1 and 2 emissions and setting your goals into these scope 1 and 2. So when you're setting goals, you should be really well define that your scope 1 is going to be so much of cut down of emissions, scope 2 is going to be this much, and scope 3 is going to be this much. Okay, so the other more adopted frameworks, which is very, very simple, sweet sort of framework, is the UNGC and the United Nations Sustainability Goals, that is the 17 goals. So the UNGC is also very commonly seen in most of the organizations' ESG reports. It comprises of mainly the verticals of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. These all come under broadly 10 principles. Which you have to see how it relates to with your operations and make the particular goals and the milestones to achieve in each particular principle. So when we look at the goals, of course, you all must be very familiar with them by now, the 17 goals. So this is also a very, very widely used adopted method where companies compare themselves to each one of the goal and where they stand to contribute to these goals. There are already well-defined indicators for each goal, and there are targets for each goal. So the company just brings up a report saying how we compare to this and what we have done to contribute to these particular 17 goals. Okay. Yes, now we come to most important of all the frameworks, which is the Business Responsibility and Sustainable Report, which is the BRSR. So the BRSR is, as I mentioned, a mandated framework in the Indian context, and it is one of the actually what general thought of is that, like in Europe and US, you see a lot of hype on ESG and so many reporting frameworks, and India is seen as a laggard here. But actually speaking, this particular BRSR framework has been very welcome in this space, and what we see is that it really maps well with a lot of world recognized frameworks. They have really well structured it to come up with this particular standard, make it very easy for the organizations to report on it as well, and has very good outstanding unique features with 38 subcategories, which aligns with the SASB standards, the TCFD, which we saw, CDP, GRI, all of this, it has been mapped to with really taking a lot of caution, and a very in-depth research has been done to particularly frame this sort of a BRSR. So we'll look into how a BRSR came into picture. Basically, BRSR as a concept evolved from BRR, which is Business Responsibility Report. This was made voluntary during 2011 itself for the top, that is the N100 companies, the top 100 listed companies. Initially, which was there as a voluntary guidelines, then kind of took form as now what we call as a mandatory guideline for the top 1,000 listed companies. Excuse me. So there was also a lot of versions in between called BRR Lite, and all of that has been reformed and condensed to a very defined version that we have today called the BRSR. So the standards as such, what does it contain is basically the standard has three main sections, which is the section A of general disclosures. As I mentioned, the general disclosures are mainly company information, company the subsidiary details, all of that basic information. Section B goes into the management and processes disclosure. Section 3 is into principles. So there are 9 principles, as you can see outlined here. And the section C goes more in depth into bifurcation of mandatory and voluntary indicators. So mandatory are those that we have to disclose. Voluntary is if you want to showcase a lot of leadership and being in the forefront of business responsibility, you can very well go into that. But what we would advise always is to also disclose certain goals in leadership in indicators as well. So the alignment of BRSR with environment, social governance aspects is that, again, with environment, you will be dealing with questions on on your GHG emissions, the scope 1, 2, 3, as I mentioned, the solid waste management aspects, water consumption aspects, how are you sourcing your raw materials? Are you compliant with what we call as the extended producer responsibility, which is the EPR, for managing your plastic packaging wastes? And are life cycle assessments carried out on your products? Like, what are the end of life scenarios that you have in mind while designing the product? And for social, of course, it is employee well-being, the trainings that you give, the awareness programs, the health and safety of the workers, CSR activities. And then finally, the governance, mainly anti-corruption questions are there. And how is your conflict management process? What is your retention policies? What is the remuneration policies? How is your stakeholder engagement? All of these are very well covered under the reporting format of the BRSR. So section A, as I mentioned, contains of the listed all the details of your listed entities, product, services, operations, employees, and associate companies that you have as joint ventures, etc. And section B goes into the management and process disclosures, questions related to your policies, management processes, your governance and leadership aspects. All of this goes into the section B, and section C is mainly the KPIs which have been defined as 9 principles. So I wanted to also just explain to you the 9 principles. So 9 principles, as you see, the titles have been clearly given here. The first principle deals with ethics and transparency and accountability. So how are there any violations? Are there anti-corruption policies in place? How is your legal compliance? So first principle goes to the governance aspect. The principle 2 deals with safe and sustainable goods and services. So what is the quality of product that you are putting out? How is the pollution, or what are the impacts that is created by that product? How is your use of resources? How are you managing your hazardous and non-biodegradable wastes? All of this comes under principle 2. Principle 3 deals with promoting the well-being of the employee, like your collective bargaining policies, the skill development and training, harassment policies and what are put in place, an ideal work-life sort of balance and how that prospers. So all of that comes under principle 3. Principle 4 deals with the respect for your stakeholders. So all of the width of stakeholders, from your customers to even nature, to investors, to suppliers, to employees, how are you impacting them on a broader level? So this is principle 4. Principle 5, with respect to respect and promote human rights. So this again goes into detailing and providing awareness on the basic human rights and the Bill of Rights, all of these protocols. And principle 6 deals with the protection and restoration of the environment. So completely with how you are contributing to conserving biodiversity, pollution aspects, etc. And principle 7 deals with the public regulatory policy. Any grievances, how do you address it? How do you partake and detail all of these aspects? So that comes under principle 7. Finally, principle 8 and 9. So 8 goes into inclusive growth, mainly how you are being very sensitive to the local communities, how you are being more equitable and more charitable. Just it's not about charity, it's about being equal. So the equity of it, how are you doing that, and what is the value to the consumers in a responsible manner? How are you providing value to the consumers in the responsible manner is the final principle 9, which showcases the safe aspects of the product, the quality that you're giving, and how competitive it is. So it's a very, very sort of a thorough reporting format which is given in BRSR, and it's very, very welcome and applaudable in reporting space. Finally, what they suggest is a sort of a 3R approach in BRSR. What we call as 3R approach is So first things first is to research, to assess where you are in this whole journey, to identify all the gaps. So we should know where we are to know where we have to go forward to. So the research aspect is first, then comes the disclosure aspect. So once you know where you are, just disclose, set goals and report that information on a quantitative or a qualitative basis, whichever is conducive for a start. So then you go on to recalibration and again refining the process, making it more better, making it more optimized, and collating of data and reporting formats. All of this, there's a continuous recalibration. So this is seen as a very solid step in the Indian ESG reporting space, and these approaches have been dictated. So finally, as a tip for choosing the framework, I wanted you to keep in mind these particular tips. First foremost thing is to know your audience. Like, what are their expectations? What are their goals? Say, how does your investor group expect or want the particular disclosures from your side? So know that to give a balanced update or on your reports. Then know the regulations. So every geography or every footprint that your presence, that your organization has in different geographies, the reporting demands are different. So you should know all the global formats and choose the best one applicable for your organization. Of course, the tools, I couldn't highlight this more. Tools, why? Because it actually takes a lot of manual effort and a long time process to put all of this together as to create even a baseline and a database. So manual effort into this is really not meaningful when you want to go for a long-term and continuous updating of data, right? So in that sense, it's very, very essential that you explore some softwares that are available in ESG space. There are already like designed softwares which can manage your data continuously. When you just put it as input, it can generate a lot of information and you can get data-driven insights readily available. And it is going to be very helpful for the long term. So this tools and softwares available has to be really taken into account when you aim for the long haul. And finally, to familiarize with your sector specific framework. So as I mentioned, the real estate as such has a particular framework, same way tourism has. So what is specific for your industry, you can look into that to stay upfront and be very competitive in the space. So we finished the first section, and this is a summary of all the framework standards and indices. All that we have discussed is given as a summary where we can see the frameworks, the goals, principles, and standards. And towards the end, we will be looking into the ratings as well. Yes, so we come to second part, which is the more, I think, applicable part to all of our viewers. That is the benefit. So I'm doing so much of effort, I'm taking so much of effort, doing so much of data collection. So what am I going to get out of this? The amount of benefits, of course, is very, very wide, and what we can say is the top line growth, that is a major advantage in this particular space, and reduced costs, the minimum regulatory interventions that you will have, and an optimized expenditure. So overall, all of these 5 key benefits are the crux of you are integrating ESG into the organization. So what we are seeing is ESG leaders benefit from a higher employee productivity and value of the employee equivalent to the retention part. So with the laggards, what happens is there are a lot of higher retention rates which can potentially be seen, which will affect your brand value, the level of productivity to stay ahead of competition, and of course the economic losses to again go attract more talent. So now we are in an era where we used to be initially scared during interviews, but now the interviews are more like how the candidate asks us the questions, like what do you give me as a company, right? Like we're kind of transitioning to that kind of an era. In that case, we have to also focus on attracting a very diverse talent pool which will stay with us for a long time. So that is one of the main elements which you can expect from a strong ESG proposition versus a weaker ESG proposition. And of course, the main push factor, what I would say, is what we call de-risking the business. De-risking happens with ESG. So the risk assessment is the crux of ESG, and this de-risking is going to be a very, very big sort of a lifesaver for organizations when they implement the ESG. Why? Because as you can see, there are a lot of ESG based parameters which are seen as important business risks as given by the data, wherein cyber incidents which come under governance, and climate change which comes under the environment sector contributes to higher level of business risks. And climate related risks also is known to is likely to cause a lot of loss, nearly about 7,000 billion to Indian industries, while also there are opportunity to have significant gains when we adopt well to the climate change practice, climate change event. So de-risking, what it does is it gives you a robust supply chain. There is less amount of supply chain disruptions that you can see, less regulatory burden. It will help you see where you are actually having some critical issues and manage them upfront, so that you're not going to wait until the 11th hour to do so. And of course, it supports you to achieve a business resilience and sustainability. So what are the risks? I have just detailed here for your information, like what are the possible risks on the E, S, and G space. So this we have already, as I discussed, aspects of social, for example, what we can say is in case that, you have identified that you're not keeping your employees happy, or there is some issues there with respect to pay, or they expect higher pay sort of thing. Means there are a lot of possibilities that there can be, a strike or those kind of unforeseen events happening, which can compromise the whole production. So in that case, when you do an assessment like this and you stay ahead and you keep your employees happy, which is the most important thing, then definitely you can avoid these kind of circumstances from happening, which is the most common proposition as a value that we see. Of course, there are also inclined risks on the environment and climate change aspects, which when you start adopting can have a bigger difference. And the regulatory and legal compliance, which we know from a lot of scandals, even recently seen. So I'm sure you're well aware of all of this. So all of this can be avoided when we have good ethics and morals in place as part of the ESG system. So the next important benefit is for the investors and the stakeholders. So whoever puts money in your organization, the 101 is that they get good returns, right? So this ESG integration has been kind of etched into the investors, that is to the value that it offers. It's more attractive for the investor to get an X amount of returns, higher profitability, higher dividends, higher valuation. So all of this are very, very strong pull factors which pulls the organizations to get their ESG game on. So increasing the investors and stakeholders with your ESG is again going to be very, very beneficial for the organization and for the investors, being a win-win situation, as it reduces the amount of risk for the investor as well. Like to think that this organization has reduced risks and my investment will be a sort of a good value of return. So all of this again, from the consumer community also, it will increase preference to your products and enhance your brand value. So then coming to the competitive part. So how does this ESG make you competitive? Because you have invested into these data-driven decisions, you get a lot of insights that we can work on and to analyze and make better. This will ideally improve your financial performance as well and make you ahead of ahead in all aspects of best practices. So as I mentioned, brand loyalty is going to be a winning factor with your ESG. You have access to new markets with your data-driven insights. You can potentially go and set business in new markets, explore them, and how it can be a revenue-generating one. Also in attraction of retention of talent, as I mentioned earlier. So all of this is going to give you a very competitive advantage. And of course, the most important. So it not only saves you money, but also helps you make more with all these integration. So this is going to be the this is usually the main value proposition, we as consultants explain to the organizations that you are not actually losing money because you're investing in this, but you're actually going to gain a lot more in the long term. So for example, what happened is recently, I think Starbucks was exploring China market, and it was not doing really well in terms of retaining the employee. So on its ESG metrics, what it understood is on a social part, when Starbucks insurance for the workers' parents, because of their age, they are not having access to healthcare. And when it started supporting the employees' parents and including them into the healthcare, then there was a very, very good retention rate and a good brand value created for Starbucks in general, and it was able to perform well in the Chinese market. So this, as you can see, are good examples that we are already observing in real time with integration of ESG. So there are so many ways we reduce costs because we avoid fines and penalties. We have better risk management. Our HR costs are reduced. We efficiently use energy, so the costs associated with that is also reduced, and we have a good improved efficiency on all metrics. So now we have kind of had an understanding of what are the benefits and what are the frameworks. So how do we implement it? What should we do about it? So how shall we go about it? Implementation part. So despite all this glitz and glam and glory that I've been talking about with ESG, we still see that only 1 in 5 companies of the 586 companies that was interviewed is reporting or giving the ESG reports in India, which is still, shows that the industry itself is still struggling to publish the reports, struggling to take part in the ESG implementation. However, we see FMCG companies doing really well because they have a lot of pressure on the environment aspects and the pollution aspects with their packaging. So they are really rushing to the game with higher rates of reporting. So in this way, there are better scopes that we see, but still the target setting in a KPMG study, what they said was the target setting for the top 100 companies when they had reviewed recently, it was around 65% and 69% target setting on the social and environmental aspects. And in itself, that also was not very precise, but also little verbose, and the language was not very it didn't show that level of ambition, I would say. So those kind of gray areas are still there, and we are still sort of striving to go to this space. So how do we not fall behind and take part in this implementation process? First and foremost, we need to gain support from the top leadership. So because, without them, we really can't take any step forward. Without the sort of approvals from the top management, we cannot take any step forward. So they should really be aware of what is this, and they should really be very supportive of putting this in the bottom line. Next, we go into defining the scope. What are the resources needed? We should kind of come to an analysis of what is the scope of the initiative. What are we going to do? Main important thing is that we need to have a team. The team in a PwC report also, what they said is it's the executives that who manage the ESG space. They are going to define how the organization can outperform. So this committee or this team of ESG that you're building in your organization needs to be very inclusive of all the departments. It should be an interdepartmental committee where you get opinions from all the various different verticals that are in the company, because that is very essential for getting a more comprehensive view and getting overall insight into the company's forefront and understanding in the ESG space. So as a first step, ensure that your board of directors are on board, and they are supporting you with resources, and you are placing yourself in a very equipped part, first and foremost. Then we go into what is to understand where you are first. So understanding the present ESG situation. What is the current data available with us? What are we already doing, and how do we assemble all that data, make it more streamlined? What are the gaps and risks. So this is the main thing as we do as consultant, is the what we call as gap assessment or the materiality assessment. So gap assessment is very essential, and you would have heard this multiple times in various contexts, right? So we need to identify the gap to know where we are going forward with. So the assessment of gaps using third party is very ideal as a second step to benchmark your performances and to see how you are comparing to your peers. So this will also establish, help you establish your long-term, short-term actions. Main important thing again is your stakeholder feedback. So we should not just come into an impression that this is what we're going to do and this is what we have learned from data, we go do it. We should really go engage with stakeholders, understand what they want first and see where we are, and then couple the two. That is most important. We need to give them what they are looking for, not what we think are the ideal information. So that's the second step. The third step again goes into developing a strategy and how do you communicate it. So this again goes into your deciding the frameworks and the goals that we talked about as CDP and SBTI. All of this is going into goal setting. Mind you that it should be very, very clearly articulated. It should not look like you're just making stuff up or you're just putting jargons in place. It should really mean something and have an impact in terms of your words and goals setting itself, because that can really come through your stakeholders. So then understand, of course, your financing needs. We cannot just go up front and say, for example, we want to fix our carbon emissions, so we are going to invest into carbon negative technologies. Means we can't go just like that, put crores into that, right? So we need to understand what are the financing options and what can we best do with those kind of budgets in place, so that we actually do something real time rather than just writing reports. So all of this is important. And finally, to develop a communication plan. So what is going to be our plan of communicating to the stakeholders? That, you know, we are taking all this initiatives, we're doing all of this. We have to communicate it to them. That is that's the place that we start at, so that they know where we are going forward. And finally, the reporting. So we need, as I mentioned, stakeholder feedback. We need to see the preferences of the investor, what they want as a framework, what they want as information, and choose those kind of frameworks, and explore the assurances or the validation that is needed, and give a structure to your ESG story and the journey. So in this implementation, as I mentioned earlier, the materiality concept is through and through the most crucial one. So how or what is materiality? Materiality is the first and fundamental step in ESG, where we are trying to understand what is the most crucial aspects where it is going to have a great consequence to your business. That is the high risk sort of aspects we will be analyzing through these through the materiality concept, which is called the material ESG issues. So what is the major issue that can have impact on your finance, on your economic or reputational and legal aspects of the company? All of this is done into the materiality assessment. So what we ideally do here is we engage the stakeholders, all the internal, external, take, you know, data from them, who they are, what they expect, how are you interacting with them, as mentioned here in the steps. So we really get the crux of what they see as important aspects and map it out to really get us the priorities. That is 1, 2, 3. This is what we're going to work with first. First, we're going to do renewable energy. Then we're going to do waste management. Then we're going to do labor standards and policies. So something like that, it really helps you give a structure to how to go about implementing them step by step. So this is very, very critical when you are going to implement your ESG, and this will be the first step. So these are some of the materiality key indicators, as they call it, like the ESG material indicators. So these are all the aspects which we should discuss with the stakeholders: the corporate governance, what are the bribery and corruption policies, how is your community relations. So all of this, we need to understand what our stakeholders see as priority. So as I mentioned, social is really seen as the most required commitment from the organization. compared to environment in some of the research reports. So it doesn't mean that you should do social and forget the rest, but still means that there are also priorities that need to be set so that we can take a step-by-step action. So you need to lay it out. So it's ideally like a graph where we map out the critical parameters and see which is of a preference. So these are some of the examples I thought I'd share with you. Okay, final part of the session. Yeah, okay. So final part, what we're going to talk about is the communication and ratings aspect. So we have done, as I mentioned, we have done so much of data compiling, collating, reporting, and all of this deciding framework, setting up teams, setting up budgets. So this is all useless unless we actually communicate what we're doing to the stakeholders, to the consumers, to investors. So the communication, if we lose there, then it's all gone. So this is key to ensure that what you're doing is actually known to the investors and to your stakeholders. So ESG ratings is another validation phenomenon where your reports are getting validated by third-party agencies. We will discuss about that soon as well. Okay. So the key here is to understand your target audience and their expectations. So as your investor can be someone from Europe, they might prefer a particular standard which is more well versed there, and or they might be into climate sort of investing, so they would prefer that you give more importance to TCFD sort of framework. So you should understand really who is your prominent investor group or your target audience. So your product can be an environment friendly product. So you need to really showcase that from an E perspective. So all of this should be really communicated to the key stakeholders in the most simplest format. It should be very, very transparent and backed by data. So the most important thing is that, I mean, everything is most important. I've been saying most important for everything, but everything is key, right? When you're building an ESG as an organization, every fundamental is key. So all of that, what we've been discussing is going to be key. But here again, the highlight is that what called transparency is also a very important aspect that we have to imbibe. What is transparency is that you are very upfront about your data, what method you're using, how are you analyzing, how are you arriving at that data. You're not just making up some figures, putting it in an Excel, putting it in a chart and being done with it. No, we are just building high credibility with our stakeholders. So we should be very, very transparent and upfront and communicate with empathy. Of course, like you should really think in their shoes, like what is the expectancy from their side and fulfill the same. Any and all initiatives that you're taking on the social side, on the green side, all of this are going to be plus points and needs to be communicated to the stakeholders. Now we come to what is called the KISS phenomenon, which is the keep it simple, stupid. So we always advise that we don't use too many jargons and make it very, very verbose, make it very detailed that nobody understands, what you're doing. It should not be like too much of data evidence, or it should not be too much of language. It needs to be as simple and the storytelling format, what we call it, like it can be in various formats. It can be like your content marketing that you use, or your audio, video, podcasts, and videographs of what you've been doing in the ESG space. All of this through your website, you can communicate to people to understand all the public data that you have been putting out. It's very, very important that it's very simple and easy for the stakeholders to understand, so that they can really see how transparent you are, how credible you are in your journey. And of course, we should not leave any opportunity. So in a client's journey, say a consumer's journey, this is a very good map that has been given where all you have potential to put in your ESG marketing aspects. So it should be very subtle, but also it can help you really upsell or cross sell, as they call it, and give you more revenue as well. So during conducting awareness training programs for your clients, for your in a B2B setting, or conducting webinars like this to show that you are embracing ESG, you are doing something to the for the community, for the environment, and you're taking legal compliances seriously. All of this, and when you have an opportunity to provide service to the customer, we can look into pop-ups in mails or text social media to say that you are how you are being a king in your ESG journey. So all of this are very good prospects for revenues as well. The key thing to note again is to very, very, very seriously avoid greenwashing. So greenwashing, you might have come across this term where it is simply just providing false or misleading information to stakeholders on your environmental impacts of the product, of the company's product or the operations. So when you think about it in an empathy point of view, there are certain reasons why the companies are kind of pushed into greenwashing as well. Why? Because there is a lot of lack of expertise and too much of demand. So they are forced to kind of come up with something and write up some report. Or what happens is like they are so confused with so many frameworks that there is no standard available, like single standard to follow, at a global level. So there is no regulated guideline which can also push them to contribute to greenwashing. And of course, to get the incentives and because of the pressure, all of this, what happens is pushing them to wrongful claims and very, very a non-transparent sort of wrongful claim. So all of this needs to be avoided. The main thing is that you ensure your every single statement that you put out has some data backing to it. The transparency should be there through and through. Every single data that you have must be every single statement that you have must be backed with data, as there is like this proper saying, if you use sustainability and ESG as a tool, you will be found out, you'll be caught. But if you use it to drive business, you're actually going to be successful. So don't see it as just like some compliance and marketing tool alone, and fall into any gimmicky activities, but see it as a tool that it's going to embrace your business resilience and sustainability. So and so that you are on a successful ESG journey as well. So finally, some tips on communicating ESG is, as I mentioned, avoid jargons. Show your unique selling propositions to how you stand out on your ESG commitments from your stakeholders. Build an infrastructure to really keep this on a consistent loop. So it's not like today we are going to go and then after 1 year, then we forgot our ESG. Next time the reporting comes, then we go refresh. No, it should be kind of a consistent data monitoring. With the technology available, it's very easy for us to do that. We don't have to sit every day and do the data monitoring ourselves. We can just feed the data and it gives us a lot of insights. A lot of tools are even at a very affordable price have come up recently in India, and these can be very helpful. So build a nice infrastructure so that it's a great foundation for from a long-term perspective. Of course, the messages that you are claiming should also align with your actions. So it's not that we say we are going to become net zero and then we are doing something which is very highly polluting. So we should not invest in companies which are highly polluting or have subsidiaries something like into these kind of activities. So avoid contradicting your statements. That is like the basic 101 that we have to do. So whatever we do, we should not contradict to those kind of statements. So as a final topic, I'm just going to brief you on ESG ratings, which is essentially your validation protocol for this ESG space. So from what is ESG rating is, this is where these third-party agencies or organizations rate your ESG performance on different scoring basis. They have their own methodologies developed, and this sets credibility to the investor, because the investors believe in these sort of scoring agencies. They've been doing it for years and have built a lot of credibility as assurance partners. And so getting this particular rating is going to be very, very important for the organization, because it demonstrates that you are actually validated, and there's benchmarking which can be done, a comparison to your peers, and there's a limited assurance which is given to your reports, so that your report is a very authentic in its essence. So all of these institutional investors, asset managers, and stakeholders are relying on these ESG reports and ratings very highly present at the present moment. This is basically a comparable metric used by investors. But again, unfortunately or fortunately, there is too much of overwhelming players in this space with more than 600 plus ratings. So what happens is the company again comes into a confusion as to what rating to choose. So some of the famous ratings are what we call DJSI, the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices. So this dates back to 1999, where this particular index was used to sort of track the stock performance of the world's leading companies in terms of economic, environment, and social criteria. So the structure of this is basically that you have to answer around some 100 questions, and there is this questionnaire needs to be filled before you can be assessed. So basically, what it does is the agency checks out all the publicly available information from your website, from your the search domains, to see what are the publicly available information and compares it with your competitors. So with this, there is a scoring been given on the various aspects which I have mentioned here on the economic, environment, and social aspects. So the scoring range here followed, that is the rating scale followed here, is 0 to 100, with 100 being the best performance, and it's annually updated. Next is what is the MSCI. So this again is a very, very highly adopted rating in a lot of by the investors. It's a very highly adopted rating, and it has more than 30 ESG issues, that is the risks, which it analyzes from the public data and media available, and the government information available from the company's disclosures. So excuse me. So it looks at all these key issues on the ESG front, and with 10 themes. So these numbers on 30, 35, or 40, all of these indicators, they keep changing and they keep improvising. So all these ratings are always being improvised to be more inclusive, to have more sectors, and be sector agnostic and include a lot of key indicators. So here the rating scale is AAA and to CCC. So the leader will be AAA, and CCC is the laggard. This, as you see here, previously we saw 0 to 100 scale. Here it's a alphabetical scale. So each one has a different method of rating. Then more recently famous one is the ISS ESG quality score. So here again, the disclosures consider more than 200 factors, mainly with respect to your governance and E and S aspects. It also has other divisions of scoring, but here the most famous one is the E and S quality score. So here it's about 1 to 10, these scoring formats, as you can see here. A score of 1 is the highest level of disclosure, 10 indicates no disclosure. And sustain analytics, yeah, so they are very, very widely known in India, especially more as an assurance partner. And here what they do is mainly the unique to ESG rating is the unmanageable risk score. So what they do here is an assessment of what are the possible controversies that can arise related to the ESG issues. It also covers more than 20 material issues and 250 indicators, which is considered for the score perspective. Here, the rating scale is 0, which is negligible, and 100, which is the most severe. That is like more underperforming, like extremely poor performing industry. So, as you see, again, there's so much of different scales of rating. So, I've just given here a comparison of the different rating agencies. Here, we can clearly see highest number of companies which have been analyzed is by the MSCI, the second rating that we saw. The next most common and upcoming is the Bloomberg ESG disclosure score, which is also very, very inclusive. It takes about all ESG parameters and external data that is available to provide scoring. So these are different rating agencies and the preferences by the companies to go for these kind of ratings. So we now come to the final part of the session. As a conclusion, what I thought was to give you some of the challenges that you as an organization would be facing, and what you can probably consider as suggestions and the progress and the way forward. So I'll just conclude with that. So from a company's perspective, there are a lot of roadblocks, to be very honest, on efficient ESG reporting. First things first is the lack of relevant expertise and the team available, the limited subject knowledge. In fact, for everyone, ESG is a very growing space and we are learning every day. As consultants, we learn every day because the regulations keep changing almost so constantly. There are so many different standards where a lot of depth of understanding is required, and very little people have this level of expertise, which is causing these sort of roadblocks. Limited access to tools, or confined within their budgets, and to report on these ESG metrics, to choose those kind of reporting frameworks can also be overwhelming, as I mentioned. So this takes a lot of time and expertise and a lot of third-party support to really get a good structure. Another main thing is the lack of standardization. So there is no one-size-fits-all sort of a phenomenon. Although BRSR is applicable to India, a lot of Indian companies have clients and stakeholders abroad. Foreign investors are involved in this space, so they have to please the wider community. So in that case, they are also going for other global standards like GRI, SASB, all of this in addition to the BRSR. So this becomes a huge burden on the company as well to take up so many verticals at once. So all we would suggest is to, as I mentioned, go for the gap assessment and materiality to really understand where we stand and where is the priority which is most in need, the highest level of risks, and then we can start from there. There is no need to become more overwhelmed because of so many options available. Of course, there are a lot of different preferences, so it is very imminent that we understand the stakeholder preferences and then cater to the same. More interestingly, what happens here is we still see that there is like a fear among organizations, which is very astonishing at a point where, because they are still kind of scared, would be a term that I would use, because of sharing data, thinking that it can create some sort of issue, or being so transparent is kind of seen scary, which should kind of be broken as a thought process, because once you're being too transparent, definitely your stakeholders will understand and will be with you in your journey. So it is very essential that we break this thought process and go forward with ESG reporting, because even a lot of SMEs, MSMEs and startups are coming forward and contributing to ESG aspects. So it is important that larger organizations who can create a much larger impact be part of this as well. So finally, concluding with the progress. So as I mentioned, some of the problems, there is lack of standardization. So SEBI is working. SEBI, that is the Securities Exchange Board of India, is now coming up, is actually already released a consultation paper where it's saying that, we will standardize the rating agencies. We will tell you that with your BRSR, you can opt for these kind of rating agencies, which will be checked up by us. We will provide and we will name them as rating agencies who are under the SEBI SEBI supervision. So in that way, it will become a little easier for you to opt for rating services, because this is going to soon come into picture. These ESG rating providers are going to be mandated, and they're going to soon come into picture. So that's going to be a great start for the industry to accelerate and encourage more companies to come forward. Also, in a global level, we also see progress. That framework as such is getting, as a singular standardized one, which is called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So CSRD is actually come into picture from, I think, Jan 5th, 2023, and it's going to be in effect from 2024. So this is going to include a lot more companies into the scope, like not only EU but non-EU listed and non-listed MSMEs, SMEs. All of this are going to come into picture who have a European footprint. So these are a lot of progresses that we are seeing in the industry. So the final way forward, to summarize, what I would say is to consider how you're going to set up your data, consider softwares, and consider consulting aspects as a first step, because this is going to help you identify where to start from. Like what should you do? Like when you're clueless or confused, this is going to be a good place to start. Secondly, of course, allocate budgets, set up resources and the committees. And then most important is to define your policies, which needs a lot of time and interactions with your stakeholders to come up with the goals, frameworks, and policies, which is going to be suitable to all your audiences. And once you put this into perspective, put this into place and define your goals, you become compliant, and ultimately you have an opportunity to even go beyond and show progress and set benchmarks for your peers. So let's all try to imbibe this culture of linking the non-financial and financial aspects together to create a real-time impact. Thank you so much for the opportunity, for listening patiently on a Sunday. I hope I have given you a lot of information in a brief and concise way. I just wanted to, so you can reach me on LinkedIn for any questions or for any support on your ESG journey. Very, very happy to help you out with whatever information and expertise I have in the space. So you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can reach me there. And I just wanted to show you some snippets of some of the reports from companies, which, the top one is the GRI. You can see the TCFT, and below is BRSR. The right side is your materiality map, which I was talking about. So just for your understanding. So thank you so much for patiently listening to me for the past 1 hour. I took extra 10 minutes, I think. Sorry about that. So thank you. If you have any questions, you can reach me. Thank you, Satya sir, for this opportunity.
Thank you, madam. Thank you lots for your reflections, and have been sharing your vast experience on this ESG reporting. As you told, ESG, you made it very simple and very easy, and we have been told what are the important factors in it, how to start the journey of ESG for the various peoples and also for the various industries. It is we have been gaining a lot of insights how to go with this ESG reporting. And once again, thank you from our team Inviti. And as you have been told that people, whenever they have been having a kind of doubt, they can able to approach you in person. Whenever they have been finding it on any difficult part,
Definitely.
they can able to contact you. And to add more values to this, Inviti have been started ESG reporting framework from last year onwards, November onwards. So we have been doing it in the part with ISO 14001, how we can able to align this 14001 with this ESG. Once again, thank you, madam, and also thank you for all the participants in the Zoom and also in the YouTube who have been watching these sessions. Thank you. Happy Sunday. And as we have been told that we can able to always live green, live kind. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the Sunday audience. You can always reach me on LinkedIn at Desika Prabhakar. I will be happy to answer your questions, and thank you for the opportunity. Have a rest of the happy Sunday and an amazing weekend. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, madam. Bye-bye.